sorry, I need to drop something.
What the hell was that?
We are not amused!
Hey guys, LunarSpawn27 here, bringing you Bleach, chapter 578, The Undead 5. Was there a chapter called The Undead 4 or The Undead 3, or did I miss something here? Well, anyway, the chapter begins with pieces of the meteorite that Kenpachi destroyed falling down towards the Serete. You know, even though Kenpachi did save the Shinigami and Quincy's from getting killed by the giant space rock of death, considering how big those pieces of the meteorites that he destroyed, I think that's enough to at least kill a couple more Quincy's and Shinigami, I'm just saying. Gremmy was so shocked and appalled seeing Kenpachi destroy the meteorite into mere fragments that he calls him a monster, but Kenpachi just replies, "There ain't a friggin' thing I can't cut." So Gremmy decides to make 7 more copies of himself. Why didn't he make more than 1 copy earlier? I have no idea. Well, since his imagination is now 7 times more powerful, he decides to summon something that Kenpachi cannot cut. Something that has no form. What is it? Outer space. Yes, Gremmy summons a giant void consisting of outer space. Holy shit. Now this is how you use the power of imagination. With Kenpachi slowly getting trapped in the void, vapor starts to come out of one of his eyeballs as well as his mouth, and it seems like his blood was starting to boil from his wounds. According to Gremmy, when you are in outer space, everything from your eyeballs, mucous membranes, bodily fluids are all forcefully evaporated. From any open wounds, your blood will begin to boil. Your lungs will implode if you try to take a single breath, and your body will slowly collapse, making you die a slow and painful death. Okay, I'm not much of an expert here, but if that is true about space, then holy crap, Gremmy, you should have done this sooner. All of a sudden, one of the Gremmy clones nearly gets sliced in half by Nozarashi, and okay, I don't know whether to think that this is completely, utterly bullshit or completely badass, because Kenpachi, I assume that before he was nearly trapped inside the void, sliced a hole back in the Serete, big enough to fit Nozarashi, then crawls out of the frickin' hole, even though his blood was boiling and his bodily fluids were evaporating, completely slices the Gremmy clone in half. You mean to tell me that not even outer space that made this guy into this is capable of killing Kenpachi Zaraki? Okay, the reason why I thought this was bullshit because this is outer space. If living humans can't survive outer space without a spacesuit, what makes you think a Shinigami will survive it? But on the other hand, I find this completely badass because Kenpachi is a freaking beast. You can't even kill this guy by sending him out into freaking space? Kenpachi motherfucking Zaraki. 100% bona fide badass. Now I know what you guys are thinking. Lunar, if you like that part in the chapter, why did you hate this chapter overall, judging from the intro? Oh boy. All in due time, guys. You'll know when I get there. So after Kenpachi cuts the Gremmy clone, there was something attached onto its chest. Then all the other Gremmy clones grab onto Kenpachi and blow up. Yeah, apparently the Gremmy clone that Kenpachi cut in half, that was a bomb. The real Gremmy this whole time was on the plateau, completely exhausted from using all that imagination to kill Kenpachi. But guess what? It doesn't work. Well, it's no freaking surprise because 1, this dude survived from getting trapped in a void of space. 2, in chapter 575, he survived from getting shot by a huge arsenal of guns and missiles. What makes Gremmy think that using a freaking bomb will kill Kenpachi? And I'm not even on the worst part of this week's chapter. So after all that, Gremmy is no longer amused and decides that he has to become more powerful than Kenpachi. So his body begins to go through a transformation thanks to his imagination powers, imagining himself to be even stronger than Kenpachi. And yeah, I'm not even kidding. That actually happened. Since Gremmy made Kenpachi out as some sort of unimaginable monster that he tried to turn into that so-called monster that ended up killing him. Since he couldn't handle Kenpachi's power, his body was tearing himself apart. Thus, the chapter ends with him falling down to the ground while Kenpachi calls him a fucking dumbass, which I agree because he is a fucking dumbass. So yeah, that was Bleach chapter 578. What did I think? I really didn't want to do this, but it can't be helped. Play the clip. Yes, I give this chapter a troll face because the ending was totally anticlimactic that it ruined the entire chapter for me. Which is a shame because the beginning to the middle part started off pretty well and Kenpachi was badass this week. I mean, how freaking crazy was it when not even outer space can kill Kenpachi? However, the more that I think about it, I think Nozarashi, all it can do is basically cut anything. And I guess that also counts dimensions? I don't know. Nozarashi's ability hasn't been fully explained, and maybe we will get an explanation on his sword, but judging from how this has been going, I'd say Ishikai's ability is to cut anything. And let's say that is Nozarashi's ability. Is it bad? Well, the problem is, even without the Shikai, Kenpachi was still capable of cutting anything. I mean, he was capable of cutting rocks, the toughest steel, lava, water, all of that. It's not a bad ability if it is Nozarashi's ability, it's just okay. The artwork was pretty good, but unfortunately, once again, the chapter felt like a short read. But the number one problem I had with this chapter, in fact, the entire fight ever since it started, was Gremmy. This is the guy who has the power of imagination, and yet, even when he's using it to its fullest extent, he sucks at it. I mean, 2 chapters ago, he said that he was capable of creating life that cannot be cut down so easily. And yet, in this week's chapter, one of his Gremmy clones was cut in half because he was concentrating too much on the giant void of outer space instead of concentrating on toughening up his body. Also, my problem is, since he's capable of creating life, why doesn't he create life that is not a clone of Gremmy? He can create anything out of mythology, out of fiction, anything. And the more I think about it, I think that meteorite was completely pointless. He should have done the giant void of outer space earlier instead of that meteorite. To be honest, the meteorite and outer space, those are the only impressive things he's ever done with his imagination abilities. Everything else sucked. You know why? It never worked on Kenpachi. And that is my problem with this fight overall. The fact that Kenpachi, of all people, had to fight against this kid who is completely a mismatch towards him. Now, I really like Kenpachi. He's one of my favorite characters, and I always enjoyed his fights. Kenpachi versus Ichigo. Kenpachi versus Noitora. Hell, that 3-way battle between him, Yami, and Byakuya that was freaking skipped in the manga. This fight was completely one-sided and boring. The only reason why Kenpachi's fights were always enjoyable, not just because Kenpachi was badass in each one of them, but because Kenpachi has fought against challenging opponents. Gremmy is not a challenging opponent. And because of that, this fight has gone entirely one-sided because we know that 99% of the stuff that Gremmy imagines never works on him. And you know what? If this is the conclusion of the fight, fine. Whatever. Because this fight has gone on for 7 frickin' chapters and I just want it to end. I don't care about seeing Gremmy's Volstandig. I really don't. I just want to move on to something else already. And the pacing of these past few chapters doesn't help. And you know what's even worse? This is the first time we've seen Kenpachi ever since he killed Unohana and learned his name of his Zanpakuto. Instead of a kick-ass Kenpachi fight where the opponent is giving Kenpachi a challenge while he's showing off his skills, we get a one-sided battle where Kenpachi is completely badass, but the opponent isn't even a freaking challenge. And it pains me to say this, but this is the first fight in this Quincy invasion arc where I have not been able to enjoy myself. And I tried really hard to enjoy Kenpachi versus Gremmy, but I couldn't because Gremmy is not a good opponent for Kenpachi. Speaking of Gremmy, as for how he died, I'm assuming since he made Kenpachi out to be an unimaginable monster, that he tried to turn into this monster which was unimaginable, that his imagination couldn't imagine it, and thus his body was being torn apart by the sheer power that's supposed to be Kenpachi. At least I think that happened. But you know what? Even if it was anticlimactic, I hope he dies. So that we can move the fuck on to something else. Please, 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 Tite Kubo, can we move the plot forward? Move on to something else? Hell, can we at least see what the hell is going on with Ichigo? So overall, I didn't like this chapter. The ending was anticlimactic and kind of ruined everything else that was good in this week's chapter. But I will admit, Kenpachi was a badass and the artwork was pretty good, especially when seeing Gremmy's body getting torn apart. And I'll admit, seeing Gremmy summon outer space, that was pretty cool, but aside from that, everything else was just bad. I hope that the next fight Kenpachi is in, his opponent will actually give him more of a challenge and we actually learn more about Nozarashi. So yeah, that is Bleach chapter 578. Tell me guys, what did you think of this week's chapter? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you think that Gremmy is officially dead? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like the video if you like it and subscribe to more videos. Also, be sure to check out my Facebook fan page and Google+. So yeah, that is Bleach chapter 578. I'm Lunar Spawn 27 and I will see you guys later. Bye.